All right, gating. So we have previously been going through compression. As you can see, the compressor is currently turned off, and we did a couple of videos, 3 videos actually, based on just the compressor, how it works, etc. The series is in the. I'll see if I can put a link below, but the series is on the channel. Today we're just going to look at gating as is. We're going to go straight into it. Like in the previous format, I have a sound lined up, and we're going to go through that sound, and I'm going to demonstrate the parameters of gating. Now, these are just the bog standard parameters you get with a gate. So, some gates might come with some additional features, etc. I'm just going to look at the basic standard features that come with all gates. I'll start by giving a quick definition of a gate. And the gate is basically a mechanism that allows you to choose what sounds are allowed to play through a particular microphone. So the most common use of a gate would be on a drum kit, where you have 6 or 7 or even 8 mics, or maybe even more. You can even have up to 12 if you double mic certain toms, etc., snares, and triple mic the kick. Then you can have loads of mics on a drum kit. But in the event that you do that and you have several drum mics in close proximity of each other, you don't want a situation where each time anything is played, every single mic is picking up that same sound. What's the point? So what you do is you get a gate and you apply a gate to the microphones, which means that the gate will only open up when the designated sound for that mic is played. So if you've got a mic on the kick, for when you're playing everything else other than the kick, that mic will be off. It won't even allow any sound to go through until the kick is played. Then the gate opens up, it allows the kick sound to come through, and then it shuts again. And that's how a gate's supposed to work. So it just cleans up the signal to ensure that when you're listening to the kick come out, you have a nice kick, and you can EQ that kick, work on that kick, improve it, sort it out the way you want it for your show. So that's a gate in a nutshell. So we're going to cover the different parameters, which, as you can see from the screen, you've got your threshold, you have your range, you've got your attack, your hold, and your release. So I'm going to start by playing the tune we have for this. It's a live kit that's playing, and we're going to go through a few things very quickly, but have a listen. Alright, so I turned the compressor on, obviously, partway through that, and you can see it gives it control. It's not all over the place, but we're not talking about compressors today. We are talking about compressors, but we're talking about a compressor gate, not a compressor limiter. Okay, so looking at the gate above, we've heard the sound, and before I go into this, I just want to give you a few parameters for our experiment. So at the minute, our threshold is currently at minus 80 dB, which means that gate is not going to trigger unless there's a sound playing at minus 80 dB. The range I have it at 60 dB, so the range is full here. And to start off our parameter, so that we can sort of hear the differences, it's best if we have that at maximum, and then that way we can really see when the gate is shutting and when the gate is opening up. Obviously we've got no attack, we've got no attack, 0.1 milliseconds attack, which means it's going to attack really fast. Again, we've got no hold whatsoever, and we'll explain hold when we get to it. And then we've got release. Over on this side, quickly go through it. Obviously over here is where we're going to be able to see the sound come in, and what dB or how loud it is. And then over here we're going to see how much of that signal is coming into the gate. And this volume measure is purely for how much is coming into the gate. It may differ from what's going into the limiter, compressor limiter. We're just looking at the compressor gate. So that may differ, but this is how much is coming in. Again, this is gain reduction. So how much gain reduction we're getting when the gate is closing. If I was to move the threshold and bring it back, you'll see that the gate will only close as far as I've told it to. So that's 4 dB minus 4 dB. Or is it plus 4? Plus 4 dB. 4 dB of gain reduction. That's plus 4.8 dB that I've set it to. And as you can see here, it's just gone above 4. That's 4. For those who can't see, that number is actually 4. 4.8. So what it's saying is when the gate closes, we don't want the gate to fully shut for whatever reason. And there are reasons when that you'd want that to happen, but in this case, like for example, if it's a singer, you don't want the gate to fully shut, because what will happen is when they go quiet below the threshold level, the mic will go completely off. And when they come back in, if they come back in a bit quiet, you might not hear the first few words. But if the gate is slightly opened, then yes, you'll be able to hear those first few words, and then it'll fully open up with time. So it's a bit more gentler. Whereas with a drum kit, particularly when you're miking certain aspects of the kit, you definitely want to shut that gate completely, so nothing else comes through whilst it's, unless the drummer is a quiet drummer, but still. Anyway, so yeah, that's gain reduction. And then this is how much of the compressed sound is then going to go out. What we're going to be getting after we've gated it. So we'll play that sound one more time so that we can refresh our memories, and we'll go through the threshold feature. Okay, so I'm going to start to bring the threshold up, and hang on, let me just see where we were at. Hang on one second. Okay, so when the kick goes down, we're coming right up to plus 10 dB, and we're coming up to the about plus 10 dB mark, which is fine. And when I turn the threshold up, what's going to happen is the threshold is gonna, as I move the threshold up, the level of dB is gonna decrease. So we're at minus 80, come down, come down, come down, come down. And we're gonna hit a point where you're gonna see that the gate is gonna begin to affect the sound of what we're listening to. And what's gonna happen is whatever is quietest will start to disappear, and whatever is loudest will remain. Now I'll let you know from the get-go, the kick and the snare are the loudest in this. There's a hi-hat and a few other bits and bobs. But there's also background noise. You can hear a little bit of a light hiss, a light hum in the background. So those are going to be the first sounds to go. And as I sweep through that threshold, you'll find that the quieter sounds, the gate is going to start to take them out of the mix and leave the loudest sounds. And obviously we've got a full drum kit playing here, and this is what we're doing here is not what you should be doing on a full kit, but this is for illustration purposes. So what's going to happen is you're going to start to hear some of these items disappear until everything is gone, and that's what the gate does. It eliminates the background noise and leaves you with the most prominent thing. And already some of you are thinking, oh, okay, so if I don't turn the volume too loud on the microphone, the gain too loud on the microphone, and I set the mic close enough to my point of impact, it could mean that I can really eliminate the sounds that I've been hearing on my kit. And the answer is yes. If that works and appropriate for your environment that you're in, that would be a good solution. But let's play that again and we'll sweep through the threshold. So as you heard, the first things to go were the background noises, then the hi-hat went, then the snare. At one point I stopped, so you could clearly hear that right now the hi-hat is completely gone. Then the snare went, but because the volume level between the snare, and this is something I wanted to illustrate for you by picking this, because the volume level between the snare and the kick were not that far apart, you'll find that if you're trying to preserve one thing and get rid of the other sound, there has to be a big enough gap in volume between the two, because as the gate is working on the background noises, part of those background noises are actually coming from the kick, if the kick is what you wanted to preserve. So you'll have a situation where if the kick is not loud enough and the background noises are almost matching, it means you've messed up with your treatment, your room treatment or your area treatment where the drums are, and you need to retreat that area so that the sounds are picked up accurately, or you set the gain too loud on that particular mic, so it's just so sensitive it's picking everything else up, or you have it too far away, and you need to bring it closer, potentially lower the gain, and you'll find that the kick will then, it won't be as loud as before, but it will be the loudest. And then once you've gated it, you can whack the volume up even more, or the not the gain on the gate. Well, the gate doesn't have a gain, but you can whack the volume up even more on the fader, and you'll find that you can get it louder. Okay, so that's sort of something that you should bear in mind. But we're going to do that again one more time, just so we can hear that experiment. And we'll start. Remember, the background noises will go, then the hi-hat, then the snare, then the kick. It's less boomy now. There we go. Right, one of the ways in which you can really aid yourself, again, I'm going to go back to the kick. We can do the same thing with the snare and various other things, but because the kick is the loudest in this kit, on this kit right now, that's the thing I'm going to be sort of talking about the most, but you can do the same thing with the snare or whatever. When you do your EQ, let's just bring the EQ page down. You'll see that this is how I have the EQ set for this thingy-bob, this sound that we're getting here, this kit that's playing. Now, if you wanted a situation where you wanted to find a way, now this isn't this is just like a hack, and you want to find a way of ensuring that your kick is louder. You've done everything you can. You've lowered the gain on the channel. You've ensured that the mics are placed closer to your point of impact, or where you want your sound to come from, but you're still getting so much bleed through that you can't eliminate or you can't set a big enough gap between the dominant sound that you want and whatever's in the background, and you just can't do it. What you can do, and this is not something I recommend entirely, because you should be EQing for clarity. What you can do is you can exaggerate a little bit with your EQ. So if it was the kick, for example, you can see how I have the low frequency set at 36 hertz, 38.6 hertz, and that's 8.4 dB. And I wanted the kick to be louder, I could boost that past 8.4 dB, and I can increase that frequency to be a bit more louder. And what that would mean now is, yes, I've not turned the volume, the actual physical volume, as in the fader, louder than the whatever else is competing. In this case, our kick and our snare are heavily competing with each other in terms of decibels, and I couldn't find a way of sorting that out. But if I come into the EQ and I boost that low frequency a bit more, and I cut out whatever frequency the snare is set on a bit more, within reason, what should happen is I should create a little bit more of a gap. And if I do it that way, let me just quickly check something here. Yeah, that's fine. It's recording. If I do it that way, I can give myself a little bit of a boost. I can give myself a little bit of an advantage when dealing with this situation. So this is just a little hack from experience. But if you're struggling to set these apart, and for those of you who do this regularly, you'll know that the two areas when it comes to gating a drum is the hi-hat and the snare. Getting separation there using just the basics can be a bit more difficult. Thankfully, because the hi-hat sounds so loud, it's easier to do it on the hi-hat channel. It's getting the hi-hat out of the snare channel. And there are various other aspects. I used to have a gate that I used to use, a physical gate, and what it used to let me do is it used to let me gate by volume, like what we're doing here, but it also had the functionality which let me sort of choose a band of frequency. So I could choose, say, if the kick was sitting at let's just say it was sitting at 60 hertz, and what the gate would let me do is it would let me choose a band. So I could say, okay, I want between 40 and 70 hertz, which means anything that doesn't come in at that frequency, i.e. the snare, the gate wouldn't open. So it was twofold. It would open frequencies, the frequency that you'd selected between two frequencies, like 40 and 70. And if it heard any of those frequencies, it would open. But it would also open at volume as well. So it was kind of two-dimensional. And I used to love it. That was a brilliant gate. And I think that was a very clever thing for them to put on the actual gate, because it really let you differentiate. But if you want some of that high-end stuff with all those extra features, you're going to be forking out a lot more money for that kind of stuff. So the traditional basic, I mean, this is obviously a gate on a mixer, so this is free with the app. It's a feature of the actual mixer itself. But yeah, let's look at some of the other parameters. So we've looked at threshold. What we're going to do is let's look at range. We're going to set a nominal threshold, and then I'm going to bring the range down, and you're going to hear the difference in sound when the gate isn't fully shutting, and it's allowing some of that sound to bleed through, but at a very lower, quieter sort of decibel range. So you can see we're telling the gate to shut, but we're telling it to only shut as much as far as, whatever we've set. In this case, we've set 10.4 dB. And if you look at this particular line here, it is coming up to about that range. I think that number here is 12. This one down here, I think that's 12. So yeah, it's coming up to about 10.4 dB. And what we're saying is only shut, but don't shut all the way. Now, when a gate closes all the way and reopens, you can hear a very clear distinction of start and stop. And I'll illustrate that for you in a second, just now. So the start stop is really harsh. It's not smooth. The transition is not smooth. And again, there are some gates which have certain features. You have an expander. I think it's called an expander. You can press it and it'll change that. It'll become more dynamic. But obviously we don't have that here. But you can use the range to soften the blow of that really harsh start stop. And I'll show you what I mean. So you can hear that now. You're beginning to hear some of the hi-hat bleed back through again, but you find that the sort of transition between the kick and the snare is more smoother because it's not taking it out completely. Whereas when we had the range fully shut, it was just on, off, and that doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound nice. So you have to be careful, wary of such things. And know that you can utilize your range for that purpose. Obviously, I can explain the bog standard uses of each and every parameter, but I'm also giving you extra tips so you kind of understand that though this does this, if I needed to have this in the future, I can still get away with doing X, Y, and Z, and that's going to differentiate your skills as a sound guy to the next person. That's what's going to make the distinction to say, well, we prefer when so and so is doing it as opposed to when so and so is on the desk, if that makes sense. But that's range for you. Let's listen to that one more time. I'm going to bring it all the way down, all the way to the top, and I'll bring it back to about 22.2 dB, so you can hear the difference. So there you have it. That's range for you. So if you didn't know anything about gating, at least you have some idea of what you can do with it. But at least you know what the range feature actually does. I'm gonna whack that all the way back up. Bring the threshold down just a little bit. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna end the video here. We're gonna play it one more time and end it here. When we come back, we're gonna talk about attack, hold, and release.